Good evening. I want to call to order the 2020 Souhegan Cooperative School District deliberative session. Thank you and appreciate everyone who's here. I'm the school district moderator, George Bauer. And typically at this juncture, I recognize a student in order to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. And we have a very deserving student to do that this evening. Fortunately, she's not here. She is up in Concord receiving her appointment to the U.S. Military Academy from Congressman Custer. And there's a senior, Georgia Jones, a resident of Mount Vernon, and I think that our entire community should be very delighted that she's taken this on and received her recognition and this accomplishment. In her absence and in her place, I have asked our Board of Selectmen representatives who are here this evening to lead the meeting in the Pledge of Allegiance. They're up here in the back corner. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Have a seat. So again, welcome to this deliberative session for 2020. And welcome to everyone who is watching this on cable TV, whether it's live or whether it's a rebroadcast that'll be available on the Comcast Channel 20, hopefully between Friday and Election Day, which is March 10. It's also available via a live video feed or a video feed on demand through the SAU 39 website. As you entered, you should have received a copy of the warrant provided to you. So I will dispose with the reading of that at this time. This evening, we begin the deliberative session, or what is also known as the first session of town meeting. And for 2020, we operate under the rules. We're governed by RSA 40:13, also known as Senate Bill 2. On Tuesday, March 10, we'll have the second session of town meeting where we shall vote via paper ballot here at the high school, Souhegan High School, on the warrant. And the warrant articles, as we have agreed to the wording on them tonight. Voting will be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. here in Amherst, and in Mount Vernon at the village school from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So at this time, I'd like to recognize School Board Chairman Jim Manning to introduce the school board and our school officials.
Thank you, George, and thanks to everybody who came this evening. I'll start to my left. At the far end of the table is George Torres. To his right is Laura Taylor. To her right is David Chen. Then we have Pim Gronstra from Mount Vernon, Amy Facey from Amherst, and Steve Coughlin. You aren't our secretary anymore, are you? This is Laura, yes, that's right. And then to my far right, our Superintendent Adam Steele, our Council Dean Eggert, our Business Administrator Michelle Croto, and our Assistant Superintendent Christine Landworld.
One of the official duties of the moderator is to appoint an advisory committee. In this case, it's called the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee. And each year we have 7 voting members who are citizens in the 2 communities. Their role and responsibility is to review the budget that is proposed by the school board, to evaluate the spending that is proposed, and to provide recommendations to the voters relative to that budget. For the past several years, that committee has been chaired by Martin Goulet. Martin, unfortunately, is on a business trip tonight and unable to be here, but thanks to his coordination and many hours of work, the committee has completed its work, and the recommendations and the opinions of the committee will be presented tonight by Joel Gordon. And I'd like to ask Joel at this point in time to introduce the committee members who are here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name's Joel Gordon. This is my first year as a member of the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee. Fortunately, I am part of a committee with a number of folks that have a lot more experience at this than I do. We have, as you mentioned, Martin Goulet is not here tonight. He's traveling on business. We have John, and I could ask you to stand when I call your name, John Boquette, Howard Brown, Peggy Harris, Jeannie Lute, John Stover. Is Dan Below here? Yep. Mark Vincent, and Charlie York. And these are the folks that have worked by reviewing the budget, and we've made recommendations and findings for tonight.
So I'd like to certainly add my thanks to all the committee members. We call upon them for the professional expertise that they provide on an ongoing basis in order to provide an assessment of the budget and recommendations to the voters. And I think that they, as a result of their work, certainly deserve a round of applause from this body, just in recognition of the many hours that they have contributed in order to make this happen tonight. And thank you very much. And so my one political statement for the night is that after town vote in March, we look at the committee again. There are some members whose 3-year terms will expire, and I am always looking for volunteers to serve on the committee. There's typically minimal amount of arm twisting, but it's a great group. And if you are interested, or you know someone who's interested in providing this service to the community, typically the role runs from about September until this time of year, which is the work period. So it's a pretty manageable piece, but something that's absolutely critical to the community. Assisting me tonight will be 2 assistant moderators in the event that their services are necessary in order to count votes or to help maintain order. And that is Bob Julian and Robin Julian. They're 2 long-term residents who every year they're here, even though their kids are no longer in the schools, but they're 2 people who have just continually maintained a level of involvement. And this level of involvement in town government is really pretty unique. I'd also like to thank the Souhegan High School, the staff, and everyone who has helped put this together for tonight. It's one thing to see what's going on here in the theater, but also remember that there is a live broadcast as well as recording for replay. So we actually have a lot of things going on at one time. The person who heads that up and makes a lot of it happen is Stan St. Ange, who's in the back here at the soundboard. A student who's also here, Shannon Hargraves. And then we have members of the technical staff from the high school and the SAU, Brad Freeman and Bruce Chakrin. Thank you very much for all your time. So voters at this session tonight, the first session, we operate under SB 2 rules, and you're empowered to do 2 things. So allow me to go through what the function of tonight's meeting is, and then also what the rules of order are that we'll comply with. So we will discuss and deliberate each of the four warrant articles, three of the four warrant articles that are on the budget. One is essentially non-debatable. And then you can take two actions. You can maintain the original wording of the warrant article, in which case that warrant article will then be presented in its wording to the voters on March 10. Or you may amend the wording of the warrant article within certain limits. And if amended and approved, then the amended article will be presented to the voters on March 10. So while we think about this process of one of which leads up to a vote, the people here tonight are the ones who are going to determine what all the other people in town get to vote on. So let me spend a little bit of time talking about the rules of order for tonight. They tend to be essential in order for us to make sure that we comply with the RSAs that are applicable to how this meeting is governed and to how we treat warrant articles because of the specific languages some of them have and the way in which we have to accommodate what is done with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to run through all of the rules of order that I have here. I would expect that you can probably read them faster than I can talk about them. But let me go through just a few. When you enter tonight, you and registered as a registered voter, you should have received a blue card. That blue card is your entitlement to vote. You should also have, as part of your registration, a blue dot. So those two elements are necessary for you every time we vote. This meeting is subject to the state right to know law under RSA 91-A. And as such, we are required to keep a record of the meeting and its actions. In order to ensure that we have accurate minutes, that we know what has transpired during the meeting, when you come to one of the two microphones to speak, either for or against an article or simply to ask questions, the one thing that you're required to do is to give your name and address. And that applies each time you come to the microphone. If you forget to do so, you'll be just gently reminded to do so. That allows our note taker, our clerk, in order to be able to record who is speaking. If you wish to make a motion to amend a warrant article, you are certainly entitled to do so, but that amendment must be in writing, and then it must be brought to the moderator. That amendment will be reviewed both by the moderator and, if necessary, council to make sure that the wording and that the context is appropriate before we proceed on it. So as you come to the microphone to speak, you will be allotted a time limit of 3 minutes. I have my handy-dandy little cell phone with a timer on it. Once you introduce yourself, your 3 minutes will begin. You'll hear the little chime which says your time's up. And then you'll be given just a moment to complete your thoughts. You may speak again once other members of the body who wish to speak have had an opportunity to do so. So one important element is that when we have a motion on the floor to amend a warrant article, the moderator will not accept another motion to amend until we have disposed of the first motion. The other thing I will do, and this is the last of these rules, is should we get to a point where it starts to get late in the evening, I will ask you whether or not you wish to continue in order to complete the work of the the meeting tonight or you want to adjourn. We don't have a lot of warrant articles. I somewhat suspect we won't get to that point. All right. So if you are in support of these guidelines for running the meeting, I would ask that you simply raise your yellow card and vote yay.
Blue card.
Thank you.
Yellow? Blue.
So let's begin with the first of our warrant articles, Article number 1. Article number 1 is a voting on members of the board for the Souhegan Cooperative School Board. There are 2 Amherst seats and 1 Mount Vernon seat. This is essentially it is a non-debatable article. It's presented to you as such. What I would like to do, though, is just to let you know that for the 2 Amherst seats, there are 4 declared candidates. Amy Facey, Stephanie Grund, Tony LaBranche, and Christine Peters. There's 4 Amherst residents. For the 1 Mount Vernon opening, there is 1 declared candidate, and that's Pim Gronsted. You will be able to vote on the Amherst residents and the Mount Vernon residents, if you're a Mount Vernon resident, representatives at the March 10 meetings. So at this time, before we move on to Article 2, since that is the operating budget, we have traditionally asked both the chairman of the school board and our superintendent to provide essentially a briefing on the state of the schools. And at this time, what I'd like to do is to turn the microphone over to Chairman Jim Manning for the beginning of this introduction on state of the schools.
Thank you, George. I'd like to defer my time to Superintendent Steele so he can begin the discussion around the state of the schools.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about our schools and specifically Souhegan High School. I would start by saying that we have a top-notch school system, one of which I am very proud to be a part of and to champion this evening for you. So a few things I want to speak through about what tells me we're a top-notch school system. First, every 10 years, we go through a process called accreditation by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They review every single high school in the New England area, and we received a glowing report last year about Souhegan High School. Here are some quotes up on the screen. You can read the full report at that URL I have up there. But I want you to know that when you read through that report, you hear that Souhegan is a special place for students and has a long tradition of being somewhere where students thrive. Primarily because of the teachers at Souhegan High School. We are routinely made aware of awards and recognitions for our teachers at the national level, at the state level. We don't go more than a month or so without having another school system come to visit us. And often the feedback I hear is there's something different about your teachers. There's something different about the relationships they have with students, the connections they make, and the depth of understanding they have for their material that's translated to their students. And yet what we hear in the news often about our school systems across our country is that they're failing, they're challenging, they're lagging behind many of the other world economies throughout the world. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal just a month or two ago showing the PISA rankings of the United States compared to many of the other top countries around the world. And you can see the United States is well down that list. Souhegan High School took the PISA exam as well, and this is how we fared. First, in reading, our average score was 535. Where that compares is if we were compared to all of the other world economies, that ties us with Singapore, which was the top scoring country. Now, Singapore is a large country, and many schools take that exam, but our students as a microcosm in that exam scored extremely well in reading. In math, we scored a 544, which would put us behind Singapore and Hong Kong, but ahead of every other world economy around the globe. And this report is directly out of the PISA's report to us. And then in science, we scored a 562, which is far and away would have been the best score had Souhegan been measured as a country by itself, which we know we certainly are. Something that's more relevant to us and something that we track even more closely than PISA is how we do on the SAT. We compare ourselves most closely to other schools in New Hampshire that are competitive, well-to-do towns that have high expectations for their students, much like we do here in Amherst and Mount Vernon. And so in reading for the SAT, among the schools we compare ourselves to, we see that we're in the middle and have some work to do ahead of us. However, we're very proud of the trend with our SAT scores. Something about SAT that folks may not realize is that we teach based on standards, and the SAT has been aligned to those exact same standards over the past 5 years. So as a result, as we've aligned our instruction to those same standards which our kids will be measured against when they apply to college, our scores are showing improvement, and we're very happy about that. In math, you can see compared to our highest competitors, our best competitors, this is where we rank. Some information that I'm just able to release to you tonight for the first time. We subscribe to a service that's helped us measure how our students do after they leave Souhegan High School, which of course is what we are most keenly interested in measuring. How do our students do once they leave? Well, nationwide, the college first-year persistence rate, meaning how many students return to college after the first year, is somewhere above 70%, but not at Souhegan, where it's well above 86% on average the last several years. Many more of our students persist through college and return to college for a second year compared to the nationwide average. How do our students do 6 years out? This measures for the class of 2012, the most recent data that we have available. 6 years after they leave our school, 68% of our students have graduated from whatever degree program they've started, or any degree program of any kind. Compared nationwide, the average is 51%. But that's not the nationwide average. That's the average of low minority, high income towns, meaning those are other towns like ours that we compare against. There are many, the nationwide average is much lower than that. These are, in other words, these are competitive school districts we're comparing these results against. Here's data that shows the class of 2012 and how they've gone through the college process. Each year this shows from the time they graduated high school what they've done. And you can see the first year, something like 83% of them, 82% of them enrolled in a college degree program. That's the green bar. The orange bar as it goes across are students that persisted in a degree program. And then the red bar at the bottom are those that have graduated from a degree program. And you can see each year how that shifted for us and how it shifts for that group of students. So we're starting to measure this to see and to make sure we can make sure our students are doing well after they leave our high school. In fact, here's every graduating class for the last 6 years and how they've persisted and where they're at in their degree program. So we now have access to this data that we can make sure we're providing a competitive advantage. How are we doing financially? Well, I can tell you that since 2011, our budget has gone up a total of 1.3%. And that includes the budget we're proposing tonight. Now, our population of students has gone down since 2011, but nothing has got less expensive since then. Buses, electricity, textbooks, even teachers, everything, health insurance, all of that has become more expensive during that time. And we're very proud that we've been able to maintain a fairly consistent budget since 2011. Last year, we returned $1.2 million in surplus, mostly from special education funds that were unspent. But again, we're very proud that we're doing the best we can to be fiscally conservative. And then something we're the most proud of is the $6.1 million in real tax money that we've saved over the last 3.5 years by starting special education programs in our district. What that means is students who previously went out of district to a very expensive school, we now have programs for them where they can remain in our local school system. That's not only better for students, it's a heck of a lot cheaper. And that's the $6.1 million you see up here on the screen. If there's a downside to these programs, is that the way cost per pupil is calculated, these funds are included, what we spend on these programs is included in the cost per pupil calculation, which artificially inflates that metric a little bit. But we know that what we're doing in saving real tax dollars off of our tax rate is vitally important. So a question, where are we going as a school system? I hear this all the time, that schools need to change, schools need to be different, schools need to get their act together. And so where are we at Souhegan High School and SAU 39? Where are we going? Well, in one statement I can tell you, we need to design a way where we can have a personalized plan for every student to maximize their success as they enter the real world. Why do we feel so strongly that every student needs to have a personalized pathway? Well, when we look at the skills that employers want out of our students, out of the students that they're seeking to hire one day, we see that many of the top skills are related to things like collaboration, creative thinking, working in groups, being able to speak publicly. If you know anything about Souhegan, you know that those are always things that we've always had as an advantage for us and things that we've always included in the skills that we give our students, but we know that we need to double down on those things. In fact, the jobs landscape for 2022 by the World Economic Forum, their forecast is a little concerning in some ways about the top 10 jobs that are declining: accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll clerks, accountants and auditors, general and operations managers. Even the other day, I spoke with someone who's spent his life as a database engineer who's looking to diversify his skill set because he believes that even designing databases will become commoditized and something that AI will take over. But instead, the emerging jobs are things that require higher order thinking skills that a machine can't do. And those are the skills we need to instill in our students. How has school changed? Well, we know all the time that school used to look like this, right? And how many people in our community still believe school ought to look just like this even today, right? And back in that time when school looked like this, we taught math that looked a heck of a lot like this. The reason why we focus so much on arithmetic is because there were no calculators or computers to solve these problems. And if we wanted to know what would happen if you divided 2,880 by 0.0036, we needed a calculator. We needed a person to calculate that because no calculator or computer was around to do the task. But when you think about it, these are thinking skills that are very low on the magnitude of engaging our brain. These aren't solving novel problems. These are learning algorithms and skill sets that are easily duplicated. But that was okay because most of the jobs in the world look something like this. A lot like the classrooms of that time. And yet today we teach math like this to our third graders. And you can see there's still arithmetic in there. There's still the need to calculate mathematics. But we're asking our students in our lower grade levels to engage their brain at a higher order of thinking to solve problems. Because we know that teaching kids to solve problems are skills that will never go away. Things that they will always be asked to do when they enter the real world. I don't know the answer to this problem, by the way. You can talk to some of our teachers. But we teach math like this because most of our business settings and most of our work settings look much more like this today than anything else. So specifically, how are we going to get where we know that we need to go? Well, the first thing is this thing called mastery learning. What is mastery learning? It's bandied about quite a bit. But in a nutshell, it is we want students to leave our school system demonstrating that they've learned what we've asked them to learn. That's really it. Back when most of us went to school, we knew that showing up for class, doing our homework, and participating in class would get us most of the way to a B-, if we're being honest. But we hadn't learned anything yet, right? In a mastery learning system, students are given very specific guidelines on what skills they have to acquire, what knowledge they have to be able to use, and what that looks like when they've actually mastered that skill. That's a mastery learning system. And if we think about it, that's what we always believe school should be. That there's something that students need to learn, and before they can go to the next grade level or to the next school or the next thing in life, they ought to know that thing before they can move on. But so often schools have not worked that way. And so at Souhegan High School and in SAU 39, we're focusing on mastery learning to make sure that our students are working to learn, not working just to earn a grade. Our students are entering our school needing much more than they used to in terms of support, guidance, and direction. And so we know that our relationships with students need to double down, that we need to focus even more on building positive relationships with students that can help them navigate the world even after they leave our doors. And so an anchoring adult, an adult for every student who they can rely on and depend on while they're in our school system, is critical to our future success. It's even more important more and more. Every year when we meet our new kindergartners, we realize how the world has changed. The things that used to be taught at home and are instilled in students at home just aren't in many cases anymore. And that travels up through our entire school system. The beauty of a mastery learning system is that every student can be challenged. The data shows us that in our school system, our students that fall behind their peers in terms of academic performance are growing the fastest. They're going from where they are to where they need to be faster than anyone else in our school system. We're tremendously proud of what we do for people who struggle to learn. But on the other end of that spectrum, our students who far excel above their peers on standardized testing, the growth data for them is not as strong as students at other parts in the spectrum. Well, we know that every student deserves a challenge and needs a challenge to be successful in our school system, and a mastery learning system enables us to make sure that's the case. Finally, we need to really explore what it means for students to have an affordable next step when they leave our high school. The cost of college is not going down and is not available to many of our students. However, when we talk to many of our students who go on to state schools or even community college, we hear the story that they are often repeating things they learned at Souhegan freshman or sophomore year when they first enter those programs. Not everywhere, not always, and certainly not at competitive schools. But isn't there a way that we can explore where we give students a leg up on their peers when they leave Souhegan High School? We'd like to think so, and we're investigating what that might look like. If we can provide here in Amherst and Mount Vernon an opportunity for students to go farther than their peers by the time they hit 18 and graduate our high school, we believe that's a huge driver and a huge competitive advantage for us. And we're looking into all manners in which we can achieve that goal. I'm very, very proud of Souhegan High School. It's a tremendous place. It's a unique place. Of all the high schools I've worked in, I can tell you there's nothing like Souhegan High School. And there's nowhere else I'd want my children to attend. I'm very proud to represent Souhegan here this evening. And I hope that you'll come along with us as we explore these options and figure out our path forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to move on to Article number 2. And so what I'll do is read the article. We will have a motion to put the article on the floor in a second, and then I'll turn it over to the chair to introduce the article to you. So allow me to read Article 2. Shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District raise and appropriate as an annual budget, operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session for the purpose set forth therein, totaling $18,377,407. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $18,371,651, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Souhegan Cooperative School District or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. A majority vote is required. This article is recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School Board by a vote of 6-0. It is recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District Advisory Finance Committee by a vote of 7-0. The expected tax impact of passing this article is 58 cents per thousand for Amherst and 0 cents per thousand for Mount Vernon. Expected tax impact of not passing this article is 58 cents per thousand for Amherst and 0 per thousand for Mount Vernon. At this time, I'd like to recognize Robin Julian to move Article 2. If you'd please come to the microphone.
Robin Julian, 9 Georgetown Drive, Amherst. I move the article. So moved.
Thank you. And I'd like to recognize Bob Julian for a second.
Bob Julian, I live with her at 9 Georgetown Drive, and I second her.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Okay, so I'm going to take everyone through the FY21 budget. I'll start with an executive summary slide. I'll preface it by saying that Adam did a great job with the presentation on the state of our schools. We have some very ambitious goals for Souhegan High School. It's a high school where you can have ambitious goals because the foundation here is already exceptional. I have a freshman in college this year who was a senior last year, and I think my wife, who's in the audience tonight, will attest. When he came back from Christmas break, he was, man, I did not realize how good that high school was. He was immensely prepared, and I'll proudly say he made the dean's list because of it. I have a junior, and I have an 8th grader who will be coming to Souhegan next year. It's an exceptional place. What you'll see in this budget, though, and the tone that I want to set is that, you know, we're walking a fine line. We're walking a fine line on the budget in the high school. What do I mean by that? It's difficult to have ambitious goals and at the same time be making budget decisions that could be perceived as underinvesting in your high school. At some point, we're going to need to make greater investments in this high school. And I'll get into that a little bit, and that'll come out. That's not this year in this budget, but I think it's important to say that we're not going to be able to do these things that we're talking about unless at some point we recognize the work that's going on in this high school with additional investment. Okay? But again, that's not this year. So going into this, we asked ourselves the question, so what are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? Well, over the past few years, there's been talk that we've had declining enrollment within the school system. I'll show you a chart in a subsequent slide. We've started to see that stabilize a bit. But we've said over the course of years that as enrollment declines, your budget doesn't come down as quickly as the enrollment declines. So as we start to see the enrollment stabilize, we felt this year that we could make some additional cuts that was trailing that enrollment. So that's why we made the decisions that we made this year. So I wanted to make sure people understood that because, you know, it's cognitive dissonance around the fact that we're wanting to make all these investments, yet at the same time, the budget's really not going up that much. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. When you look at the executive summary, then we had some goals. One was to pass a budget that supported the strategic efforts within the school system. So that's how you get the warrant article number 2, the budget of $18,377,407. Our default will be $18,371,651. So the delta or the difference on that is not very big, but we'll get into the reason why for that. The second goal was to support a 4-year teacher agreement that solves some competitive imbalances. So Steve's going to cover that in terms of the PPC agreement. We are asking, and we're putting Article 3 on the warrant for $299,102. I'll speak to this just for a moment here when I say that we are asking a lot from teachers at Souhegan High School right now. A lot. They are taking on a tremendous amount of work. And I'll try to say this in the most sensitive way, in that if you go into other school systems in the state, they always don't put in the extra hours outside of just the school time that you would always expect in the school. Our teachers, for the most part here, are not like that. They're doing all sorts of extra things on top of trying to implement mastery learning. So this PPC agreement goes a little ways to address that. Again, I'll let Steve cover that. And then the last goal was to pass the first year of a 20-year plan to support a capital maintenance plan. As you look around the school, we've got a great school. looks a heck of a lot newer than the high school that I went to in Manchester, New Hampshire in the 1980s. However, it is starting to wear and tear, and we have not made the proper investments to keep it where it needs to be. So this is just the first step and the first investment of a capital maintenance plan to stay ahead of where we need to be. Okay? So how do we go about framing out the budget every year? Like, what's the thought process that goes into it? Well, with any school system, schools are, it's a people enterprise. It's a people enterprise. Your costs are in your people, and your inputs are little people that come through. So you start there. If you look all the way back to, this goes back to 2002, you can see that the enrollment in Souhegan really peaked in 2006. I think the number of students in the school was approaching 1,100 at one point in 2006. Since then, for a number of different reasons, our enrollment has dropped quite a bit. But you can see that beginning in FY19, we're starting to see some plateau. We're starting to see some stabilization. So we started with this with thinking about how we would build the budget. The other thing that we did this year that was new, and I want to thank board member David Chen. We started the budget discussion late spring last year. David and I were talking, and he said, geez, it really makes sense to, when you think about these schools, not to think of them in silos. They're really interconnected. And so he said, we really should think about, what's going on in Clark Wilkins, and what's going on in AMS, and what's going on across the SAU. So we did that. Every month we have a four chairs meeting. It's basically just a meeting to set the agenda for our board meetings and make sure that we're covering all the bases. But during those meetings, we started to have a little bit of additional conversation around, what's your needs, what's your needs, what's your needs, to take our view from the 50,000 foot level up to the 100,000 foot level across the SAU. So in those discussions, we considered a few things. We considered timing of staffing agreements, not only in this school, but in other schools that would go into our decision making. So that would impact, for example, the number of years we would want to put into agreement in the PPC contract, for example, when we looked at what's happening in other schools with their collective bargaining agreements. We thought about facility planning and resource allocation. So that speaks to the master project plan and the funding plan and the capital maintenance plan that we're having here tonight. If you had watched a couple of SAU board meetings I think it was a couple of months ago, Adam put a plan together on the capital maintenance plan that had a number for Amherst. I think it was like 500 and something thousand, which you'll hear in a couple of days, and then 100,000 over here. So we're looking at it holistically versus just what's going on in Souhegan, so we can have a better sense for how we're going to impact the taxpayer. And then lastly, student programs and support. So, Mastery Learning, I know it's a big topic here at Souhegan because we're just rolling it out right now, but Mastery Learning has already been rolled out in the other schools. If you go to Clark Wilkins or you talk to my eighth grader is very comfortable with what's going on. So that's all rolling up into the high school. So we brought that into the calculus as well. So that brings me to where all that landed. I just want to review a couple of budget highlights. So, as I said before, when you looked at the enrollment is starting to stabilize, but it really only started to level off in the FY19 budget and class. So, we really felt like, we've been telling the taxpayer for several years, look, this is going to catch up, right? So we delivered on that this year. Our proposed budget includes an additional $485,000 in staffing reductions. Now, a lot of those are partially in response to the enrollment. The other thought process is that, and you'll hear from Steve, we want to make some investments in the PPC agreement, so some of this is to address that as well. So that's the first thing, and you'll see that in Article 3. So overall, the budget is increased by 1.54% from FY20. Now, I know there's going to be some people in town who might be disappointed by that. You know, there's always this sense that if enrollment goes down, the budget should be going down. But I think Adam stated it really well. As we have this thing called inflation, a lot of dollars are being pushed back to municipalities in the form of retirement. Healthcare costs continue to go up. Heating oil continues to go up. Transportation continues to go up, which impacts that number. Now, having said that, if you look at the sub-bullet right underneath, our budget would have actually gone down by just a hair over 2% if we didn't have increased costs in special education. I'm not blaming special education. I don't want that to come across. Very important. And Adam talked about what our strategy is for special education. But this overall number is going up because those kids who are down at Amherst Middle School, if this makes sense, those kids that are down at Amherst Middle School who are out of district, who are now in district at a lower cost, are now going to be included in our FY21 budget. So that brings the overall budget up to 1.54%. Otherwise, it would have been down by just a hair over 2%. So this is the operating budget warrant Article 2, which every year I read and say to myself, why did I do that? I think George did a great job. Mr. Moderator did a great job of that. So this is that's what it looked like on the that's what it looked like on the ballot. And then that takes me to the operating budget for Article 2. So a couple points of clarification. George had mentioned that the board voted 6-0 in favor of the budget. If you'll just count the number of heads up at the table here, there are 7 of us. So where's the extra vote? So Mr. Torres, like most of us, we all work for a living up here. Right, George? George was out of town at the end of the public hearing when we met and voted on the budget following the public hearing. So it was a 6-0 vote. We haven't had a chance to come back to meet in a formal hearing until tonight. So before the meeting tonight, I opened the meeting. We got together as a board. We voted again on all of the articles, and this is now a 7-0 vote. So that's important for everyone to know because George is present. And I believe at least in my notes, it says 6-0-1, but I believe the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee is 7-0 as well. So the other piece to this is also tax impact. I know we read it. It's the same whether we're passing the article or if the article is defeated. A couple of things I did want to mention in terms of tax impact drivers. Why is it 0.58 per thousand? A couple of reasons for that. One, and I'll actually get into it, I'll give you a little bit of insight as well at the very end of the presentation, but our fund balance is lower by a significant amount from the previous year. So our fund balance last year was $1,251,000. This year the fund balance is $400,000. Why does that matter? It matters because when your fund balance goes down, the delta or the difference gets kicked up into the line item where we're going to tax we're going to generate our revenue from taxing the taxpayers in Amherst. So that's why the tax rate goes up. And I just wanted to make sure that that was explained as part of the operating budget as well. I'll give you a little bit additional context for that later. Okay, just a couple more slides and then we'll move. So this is just another way. I'll give you 2 ways to look at the budget. The first way is how the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee breaks down the budget. So what you're seeing is the subcategories in the left-hand column. You're seeing the FY20 budget in the next column just to the right. You're seeing the FY21 school board proposed budget. So that's the difference between 20 and 21 in those 2 columns. You're looking at the change, so we give you the delta or the difference in the 4th column, and then we give the percentage at the end. When you look at this, okay, one of the biggest line items is curriculum. So you have to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. So under curriculum, the curriculum portion of the budget is going down negative 2.85%. But the second biggest line item on the budget is special education. So the special education is going up 16.34%. So I'm trying to connect the dots here around why the budget's going up 1.54% when it could have gone down 2%. It's really because of that special education. It's from repatriating our special education students from out of district to in district, which Adam explained is actually at a lower overall cost. It's just now included in the budget. Here's one other way to look at the budget. This is budget by fund. People have asked me, what's so special about a fund? Well, a fund is really just a public school way of calculating. It's like divisions in a company. You know, you'll have one division and another division. This is like divisions in a company. You have your general fund, your food services fund, your grant fund. So this also shows that it's up 1.54%. The caveat here is that your food service fund and your grant fund typically don't have any impact on the tax rate. It's really on the general fund. And you can see here that the general fund proposed this year is $17,643,731. So that's the number that's impacting the overall tax rate. Okay. That's it, Mr. Moderator.
So at this time, I would like to recognize Joel Gordon, a member of the Advisory Finance Committee, to present the findings of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. The findings of the committee are outlined in the package that was handed out on the table on the way in. There were 4 primary findings that we came up with after reviewing the different sections of the budget, as Mr. Manning had outlined, the way the SAFC looks at how the budget is put together based on really disciplines and functions within the school system. When we looked at this budget on an overall basis, we think this is a responsible budget. We think it does what the school board and what the administration had outlined that they were trying to do from a strategic standpoint. We were continuing to learn through the process what some of the priorities were on achieving the vision that Superintendent Steele had outlined for us, and that's going to be an ongoing process that we'll be dealing with next year and as we continue along. Consistent with that is another finding is that we think that it would be helpful and appropriate to consider a multi-year plan. There's obviously a strategic vision that's out here, and we believe that if we could put that into some kind of a long-term financial plan that we could share with the community, we'd all be able to be on the same page as how we move forward in understanding how we convert the strategic plan and the vision for the school into a financial plan and the impacts on the community that way. Finally, we supported the next warrant, the last warrant article that we're not talking about yet, but that's the capital maintenance plan that was explained and how to deal with the age of the school and to maintain the appropriateness of the school. And as we went through the specifics of that capital maintenance plan, there were some items that we think needed to be addressed that we didn't see on the plan, and we would just hope that in future year budgets we begin to be able to expand on what that capital, the full extent of the capital plan. And the example that we gave in here is the new turf field that was put in a number of years ago. It has a finite life, and that we just want to make sure that there'll be funds available when that comes time to replace it. And I think that addresses all the findings that we had. And again, those are in the thing. As Mr. Manning did point out earlier on, we originally, and showed on the slide, we'd originally had a 6 in favor with 1 abstention in our original meeting. We also had met earlier today, and that amended the vote to 7 in favor on all 3 warrant articles. So we're unanimously in support of all the 3 warrant articles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. One of the things you'll notice within Article 2 is that the article provides for a default budget. The default budget is the funding that the district will receive in the event that the article itself does not pass. In order to explain the default budget, we'll have a presentation by Board Member David Chen.
I will get to the default budget, but I'm going to start out with a couple other things. Reiterating one thing that Jim said was that the good news is that our enrollment numbers have stabilized. And we see, 3-4 years out, basically the same number, roughly the same number of students, somewhere between 740 and 750 students for a number of years out. And that's important because when you start budgeting, the first thing you want to do is look at what that enrollment number is and that enrollment population is going to be. That basically started with the help of a citizen that volunteered to support this idea of generating a forecast. And our previous forecast basically we're using what's called a cohort method, which basically takes 8th graders, moves 8th graders up into the numbers, and then exits a senior class, and you have a number of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors again, and that happens over and over again. But that doesn't necessarily take into account all the things that you'd like to have in terms of a good forecast, especially in the lower grades. In the high school, it's not as bad, but in the lower grades, with different things like, birth rates and new housing starts, they have big effects on the enrollment throughout the district. And as Jim said, one of the things we really want to do is look at this thing as an entire SAU and not just a district for Souhegan. So, by the way, Steve Frates is open to criticism for his calculations on the enrollment. If anybody wants to come after him and talk to him, I think a number of us had already, right, Adam, and pretty much been satisfied with the numbers that he generated. The next thing is the cost per pupil.
Okay, Mr. Chen, just in order to maintain a kind of coherent chain of thought for the audience and the viewers, if we could stay with the default budget to begin with and then come back and address these other issues, I'd appreciate that.
All right, moving. If you want to do that, that's fine.
I'd like us to stay focused right on Article number 2 to begin with.
So the budget change that occurred, we're adding 5 paras in special needs, and that was 5 full-time paras. All those paras actually were representative of the population that moved in as freshmen from the middle school. Because we don't have a contract that allows those teachers to move up, they basically have to change. They have to be hired new at Souhegan. So there's a cost of doing that. There's removing some of the options being considered to reduce our expenses are to finalize and basically have a budget that we want to present, which will be essentially a $485,000 reduction in the budget. And what we're going to basically do is look not more deeply at in order to get to that default budget, we're going to look more deeply at the what's called the master schedule. And the master schedule is a way of looking at every class, every teacher, every room, and seeing exactly what students we need and what classes we're going to have and offer. And so at that point, we'll make some decisions with the master schedule in mind. This is the final enrollment for students, basically, before they start school, and we'll know what the staffing needs are going to be. In terms of the budget calculations, okay. Basically, you start with the budget calculation, which is the current year budget, which is $18,098,289, and then the special needs number basically is the addition of the paras, and subtraction of other needs that are going to be in the special needs category, the special education category, will be $365,374. Benefits changes are going to be up $187,000. Facilities costs are going to be up $31,000 for necessary improvements. Transportation is going up $17,000. The SAU assessment is going to be an additional roughly, will be down $16,000, and everything else is going to be down about $46,000. Technology is down roughly $990,000, and the curriculum is going to be down $166,000. Total changes will be $273,362, which makes the default budget $18,371,651, and that is a difference in $5,756 between the default budget and the budget that's from last year. Now, Mr. Moderator, do you want to have a discussion of the budget or not?
So what I would like to do is to maintain our kind of focus here, which is Article 2. Once we finish the articles, there's a open session there that we will have to, because I know Mr. Manning has already asked me to be able to present information, and you're more than welcome then to present at will. And I'll make sure I keep that on budget. Part of the difficulty with these meetings now that they're broadcast is that unless we stay on track, it's almost impossible for people watching this on rebroadcast to understand what it is that we're doing. So at this point, if there's no further comments from the board, what I'd like to do is open.
Mr. Moderator, so Mr. Chen's presentation that he started was part of our full presentation. We just threw the baton back to you prematurely, and then you had gone to the Ways and Advisory Finance Committee. So the material Mr. Chen wants to finish presenting is part of our overall presentation around the budget and the tax impact to the citizens. It's relevant to Article 2 before it's debated.
Okay, so the moderator interpreted your request was that Mr. Chen was going to talk about the default budget. And so that fit fine. If, in fact, he has a part of the presentation of your general presentation, unless there's objection from the body, then I'll allow him at this point to proceed with that.
Thank you.
It was a little out of order, but so in order to understand our budget and its comparison with other schools in the state, we took a look at what the state average was, which is published, and what the Souhegan cost per pupil is. Now, cost per pupil is important because it's a way of measuring one school against another school and measuring the timing of budget increases in that. And so one of the things that you should note is that the state average is rising faster than Souhegan's according to our forecasts. We have a forecast for our budget. We've also prepared a forecast for the state average as well. So Souhegan has basically stabilized its cost per pupil, which is I think a strong thing to say about how we've managed the budget up until now. So what is cost per pupil and why is it important? It is the only state regulated measure of educational efficiency. It's required by the Department of Education, New Hampshire Department of Education, for all schools, all sizes, all schools, all grades. It is the only efficient measure that can be used to compare year-to-year numbers and school-to-school numbers, as long as their grades are the same. And based on the specific, it's based on specific numbers that are produced in what's known as the Department of Education 25, which is a spreadsheet. Anybody can pull the spreadsheet down and take a look at it. But it's numbers that have to be pumped into that spreadsheet, and it comes out with the cost per pupil number. Cost per pupil has been measured consistently for the past 25 years in a very consistent manner, and so it's good reference material for how things have progressed. Cost per pupil calculation removes some costs, and this is an important thing to understand because both Adam and Jim referenced the notion that it may work against the cost per pupil. It may raise our cost per pupil, but we may be able to do certain things that are more optimal than previously thought, and so previously worked. The things that it pulls out of the cost structure are transportation costs, which are all transportation, including busing to and from football games, busing the kids into the school. All kinds of transportation costs are removed from the calculation of cost per pupil. Food services is pulled out. Bonding instruction, basically you're looking for a way of measuring operating costs, and bonding costs are really separate from operating costs. And very importantly, it removes outside tuition, both special education tuition and vocational education training. And then finally, it eliminates the costs associated with summer school. It makes it a comparison of operating costs doable. Now here's some of Souhegan and its very tactical, more tactical goals, and that is to reduce and make our operations more efficient. Cost per pupil can work in a counter role in some of the cases in our mission. If you pay outside education tuition, you dramatically increase your costs. Outside tuition is very expensive for special needs kids. So there's several ways you can work on reducing that cost. One of the ways we've elected is by hiring people to provide the services that these outside services require and do them in-house. Now there's a downside to that. If you don't forecast it properly, you may have overstated your needs. But last year, not this current budget, but last year we hired 2 special needs professionals. One was a board certified behavior analyst and $102,000 including benefits, and the other was a special social emotional difficulties, and that was at roughly $80,000. And these were costs that went into in addition to our budget last year. But what we've noticed is that was able to reduce our costs in the next couple of years of about $5 to $6 million, as Adam said, and at least in the first year, it reduced costs something like $300,000 or $400,000, and when you subtract out the costs of the actual educators who are doing it. This tactic increases CPP, cost per pupil, because it adds staff, and staff gets counted. It doesn't matter if there's special needs or not, staff gets counted. And basically what that does is it allows us to provide better services for the students that are being administered this education, and a more close relationship. They're not going off site all the time to some other place. So it's another way of looking at it. In addition, we can derive additional revenue, and which is very important. If we have excess capacity in those special needs people, we can actually derive revenue and bring money back into the school district to further offset those costs. This last year, we weren't able to do that to a large extent, but as we do this more and more, we will be able to make that fruition come true. There are some issues with cost per pupil. One is they must be compared with like grade ranges. And there are too many variations. The other problem is there are too many variations in shared costs. So, for example, Souhegan is a district by itself. Hollis Brookline is a district that has both high school and middle. Hollis Brookline has high school and middle school in the same district. So, in order to get a comparison of cost per pupil for the high school, for example, you would have to take all the shared costs that Brookline and Hollis, the middle school and the high school have, and carefully partition them out. Now, these costs generally are relatively small, and in fact, the administrators at Hollis Brookline don't really care to make one school look better or worse than the other, so they arbitrate this and they come out with the best answer they possibly can. It's not so we're talking about costs that are probably less than 1%, may have a less than 1% swing in the operations. Another problem with the cost per pupil is you really can't compare mega schools against micro schools. Mega schools are like Nashua South. Micro schools are like Profile High School. Nashua South has like 1,800 or 1,900 students. Profile High School, and they have economies of scale that can't be compared. So and then Profile would have something like less than 200 students, and one principal and one dean of students or whatever, and that would be it. The administration staff is very small, and the economies of scale don't permit things that can run up the cost per pupil. So one of the things that we have to do is constantly understand the exclusions that are in the cost per pupil calculations and override those when they're necessary, which is what basically we try to do with this budget in bringing down the over cost per pupil down, but also in making good, sound decisions about what staffing we will include and add. Okay, I think that's where it ends.
So at this point, now that the article has been introduced by the school board members, we're going to open the floor up to questions from members of the public. So if you have a question, comment, please go to one of the microphones and introduce yourself. Make your comment or question if you would, please.
Dwayne Purvis, 145 Hollis Road in Amherst. I have two questions, Mr. Moderator. The chart that was given showing enrollment in this new method, what are the numbers, what are the projected numbers that you're working with for fiscal 21, and what are the numbers for fiscal 22? The second question.
All right, so if you just hold that a second, let's get an answer to that. Mr. Chairman.
You want to take that?
Give us 1 second.
Yep.
So the numbers that we worked with for FY21, 734 and 752 for actual FY20.
Okay. So that would suggest, as of October 1st, which is the official number, you had 750 at that time. The cohort method would have suggested you have a net negative of 37 students with the 200 or so that you have graduating and 160 or so that are coming in. This is a delta of about 20 students, and that, I guess there's enough of a belief that that will be the case. And okay, all right. Second question deals with the $485,000 that the board suggested it was going to take out. But when I look at the default, I should see about a $485,000 delta there as well. And I was just wondering, where is it? Can anybody explain the $485,000 reduction?
Yeah, the law around default budget calculation changed a couple of years ago. So all of the proposed positions that are reduced in the proposed budget are also reduced from the default budget calculation.
Right. I understand, but I don't see the, I'm trying to find the 485,000 based on what we have there.
Yeah, the net of all the changes are listed there. So that includes the $485,000 in reductions for staffing that come out of both the default and the proposed. I'm not sure how it's listed on the chart behind me, but they're in it's in both places.
Okay. All right. I know there's some additions, but I would have liked to have seen the subtraction.
Understood.
And it's not clear with that. Thank you.
So are there other questions or comments?
My name is Margaret McCabe. I live at 9 Brigham's Way in Amherst, and I have a number of comments. Number one, the actual budget as of the end of June 2019 was $17.3 million, and this budget is $18.3 million. That's an increase of $1 million, and you're doing what you've always done. You're budgeting to budget, not budgeting from actuals. That's point number one. Point number two, the all-in per pupil cost, if all of the warrant articles pass, using 750 students, will be $25,035 cost per pupil. That's a big number. Number three is our cost per pupil is higher than other towns with better SAT results as shown on your charts. And special education costs for those other schools are also included. Unless you're going to split it out and show me how much are in district and out of district from those other towns, I don't think you can generalize that without specifics. I also want to raise the $485,000 that should have come out of the default budget. It's almost the same, so therefore you're adding the 5 special education new staff to the default budget, even though RSA 40:110C defines a contract as previously approved in either the operating budget authorized for the previous year or in a separate warrant article for the previous year. These people were not in our district. They were in the Amherst district. The voters aren't even the same voters because in Amherst, it's Amherst citizens only. For Souhegan, it's Amherst and Mount Vernon. So I'm questioning the default budget calculation.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, do you wish to respond, or that was simply a comment?
I think there's a slight confusion. There are students with special needs who are moving from the 8th grade to the 9th grade in September. So those students are coming up from the Amherst School District. The staff that support them, they're Amherst School Districts to decide what to do with, keep, lay off, whatever. We, however, need to hire 5 new positions to support those students. So the people aren't coming, but the federally mandated need to spend to support the students is coming. So that's where those 5 new hires come from. So it's not, this isn't contracted labor that we're moving. It's the dollar cost of a need that we must fulfill.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from members of the public?
Can I comment on that last?
Well, yeah, so before you do, let me yield the floor here to Superintendent Steele for a moment.
Yeah, I think Ms. McCabe's question, correct me if I'm wrong, is not whether the need is required, but why the staff members can be included in the default budget calculation. Okay. And so I think it's clear that the students are matriculating from one school district to the other and that the need exists. So I'd like to ask council, so if I could, the default budget calculation used by the school board interpreted the special education expenses as required by law and thus included the staff members in that calculation, even though they were not in existence last year for the Souhegan Cooperative School District.
So that is essentially correct. My name is Dean Eggert. I'm with the firm of Wadley, Starr & Peters. And we spend a lot of our time dealing with both the federal and state special education mandates. And so there are 2 or 3 components to a default budget. You have to adjust up or down based on obligations that are mandated by law as well. And so it's that latter category, not the contractual category, but the mandated by law category that is driving the necessity to include that within the default budget.
Thank you.
And the citation for those of you who are into the statutes, it's RSA 40:13, paragraph 9, subpart B.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Paul Mancini from 6 Potter Way in Amherst. My question is for Mr. Manning. Last year at this meeting,
So your question should come to the moderator, please.
Oh, okay. My question is, last year, my recollection at this meeting is Mr. Manning characterized the budget last year as a maintenance budget, while the board would kind of figure out the way ahead. That's my recollection. My question is this year considered still a maintenance budget, or is the Mastery Learning the way ahead that they were trying to find a year ago?
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Manning, would you care to respond to the question, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd say Article 2 is a maintenance budget, yep. It is. The Article 2 piece is, yep.
Hi, Stephanie Grund, 5 Colonel Wilkins Road in Amherst. I was at the 9th, 10th grade presentation the other night, and it was mentioned that you're dropping CTE busing. Is that true? And if so, how much is the decrease on that?
Mr. Steele?
Thank you. So those who aren't familiar, CTE is Career and Technical Education, what we used to call vocational education. And one of the requirements in the educational regulations, the administrative rules, are that we provide bus transportation to students to those centers that we partner with, which we partner with Milford, Nashua, and Alvern. Thank you. However, the administrative rule says when budget funds are available. And so we still are going to maintain offering of those programs to our students, but we've become more selective in which ones we provide bus transportation for those kids and which ones where we ask the students either to drive themselves or find an alternative way of getting there. So we're not completely eliminating it in this proposed budget, but we are trying to be more strategic about when we use it, as opposed to having one bus take one student at the cost of $200 and some odd a day.
I have one more question.
Yes, you may.
My other question has to do with professional development funds. I was reading through the minutes from the January meeting, and Christine had mentioned there's 13 teachers I think we're paying for Masters in Competency-Based Education. And I'm just wondering...
So, excuse me, and Christine, you're referring
Christine
to...
Landwell.
Thank you.
And I just want to make sure, are we also providing professional development funds to teachers for masters in their content area? I think that's a more in-depth area that will affect the classrooms, and I just want to make sure that we're also providing funds for those.
Yes.
Yes.
So I would just like to remind you that while a lot of us here in this room know each other and we talk to each other all the time, members of the public and others who are watching this on broadcast may not know who we are referring to. So as you refer to people, please try to use their full name just so that, A, there's a record, and B, that hopefully we help educate the public as to what's going on in this room. So other members, anyone else who would like to speak to this article?
Margaret McCabe, 9 Brigham Way. I'd like to make a motion to amend the article. May I do it at this time?
You may do that at this time, but then you need to provide me that motion in writing.
I do. Do you want it before I read it?
No, read it and then bring it down. That'd be
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
The reason I'm doing this is because 1.2 million was returned at the end of last year. They're doing.
Okay, so please read your amendment first. And if
Okay.
there's a second, then we'll discuss it.
Okay. Shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District raise and appropriate an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purpose set forth herein, totaling $17,877,407? Question mark. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $17,871,651, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Souhegan Cooperative School District or by law or the governing body, as may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:30 X 10 and 9 Roman numerals, and take up the issue of a revised operating budget. Majority vote required.
Okay, thank you. So before I ask for a question, I'd just like to ask Superintendent to verify the calculations that are in that motion.
It's a $500,000 deduction to both lines.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I don't believe the default budget can be amended by the body at the first session.
I believe that's correct. So if you would like to withdraw your motion and then restate it, you may do that.
May I mock it up and
Sure.
redo it? Okay. Do I have to read it again?
No, just read the change in the numbers, please.
Okay. For the purposes set forth in totaling $17,878,478, should the article be defeated, the default budget shall be, which is higher now.
So I don't believe we can amend the default budget.
No,
though.
I know, so I have to.
Oh,
I have
higher
to,
than
I have
what
to
you're-
look it up.
All right, so you withdrew your.
18,371,651.
Okay, so you withdrew your prior motion. And the new motion is to reduce
The budget.
budget by $500,000.
Correct.
Correct. Is there a second? Wayne, would you please come to the microphone and make your second?
Dwayne Purvis, I seconded 145 Hollis Road.
Thank you. So now, do you wish to address your motion?
Yes, I'd like to address the motion. The reason I put this motion forward is because at the end of last year, 1.2 million was returned to the taxpayers. And I understand part of it was revenue, part of it was expenses. I think about 800,000, Adam can correct me if I'm wrong, was expense related. The budget was done as a budget-to-budget comparison, even though the actual was 17.3 million, and you're now budgeting 18.3 million, a $1 million difference. So I think the budgeting process is faulted in that you're not using actuals to prepare the budget, you're doing a budget-to-budget comparison, and I think the reduction of 500,000, given that you returned 1.2 million, is reasonable.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, do you or a member of the board wish to address the motion, the amendment?
I don't know the exact amount, but I believe the majority of the unexpended funds from last year, and the overwhelming majority, was unexpended special education funds. And if someone can back me up while I'm talking and let me know I'm doing okay, that would be great. If I could pull out a perennial favorite in budget discussions, special education budgeting is done on a zero-based basis. every year, the special education or student services group looks at all of the students who require services and builds from scratch the cost of those services into the budget. So it's not that we say, well, we spent $1 million on special ed last year, let's just nudge that up 5% and hope that's good enough. We start from scratch and say this student has this plan that is agreed to. It's a contract between us and the parents, if I can speak very vaguely about special education law, and we then have to budget to meet our terms of that contract. So you can't say, well, gee whiz, some of the special education costs you expected didn't materialize. You were very responsible and sent them back to the taxpayers, as you should have. Therefore, we don't believe any special education forecast going forward. We're working with the best information we have. We're talking about students who aren't here, who may not be here yet. We know some are here, but we don't know all of them. We know the current state of their need, but not the future state of their need, and we have to do the best job we can with the information we have available. It would be very irresponsible to just whack $500,000 out of the special education budget that has justification for everything in it, just because we were able to be frugal and some of the needs we had to meet in the prior year disappeared before we had to meet them, so we saved the money.
Okay, so just a clarification from the moderator. I don't believe your motion was to remove the $500,000 from the special education budget, but rather from the article.
That's true, Mr. Moderator, but the justification was around the was essentially special ed costs.
I understand. Okay. Superintendent Steele, do you or a member of the administration wish to address the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So last year's unassigned fund balance was $1,283,300. Of that, $348,000 came from excess revenues, which can't be spent by law, meaning we received more revenue from the state or other places that we didn't anticipate, and that would directly offset the tax rate this past fall. Additionally, we had $590,000 that was underexpended from our expenditure side of the budget that was related to special education. Of that, $277,000 was for special education out-of-district tuition that we expected to spend and then didn't have to. Support services associated with special education was underspent by $168,000, and special education transportation was underspent by $145,000. And luckily, I don't remember exact circumstances about why these were underspent, so I can speak freely, but sometimes students move in or out of our town, and we can't predict that. We have no way of predicting that. And then the balance of those things, the $348,000 in excess revenue and $590,000 related to special education, is an unassigned fund balance of about $345,000, which, if I do the math in my head right, is about 2%. Typically, my goal is to always have between 1% and 2% for an unassigned fund balance. The reason for that is not because I want padding in the budget, but instead because there are things that I can't anticipate happening, and our budget is a fixed ceiling, meaning I can't legally spend $1 more than what voters approve each year in March. And so if we have something unexpected that happens, there has to be something available to do that, because the only other places we have to take money from are things like sports or other elective things that we all really want to do, but maybe won't be able to. So the point is well taken, and it's nice to have Ms. McCabe back engaged in the process. But I would say that our unassigned fund balance last year was much tighter than what it appeared.
So Mr. Gordon, does the Advisory Finance Committee wish to make any comments on the amendment?
Having the responsibility of reviewing the curriculum portion of the budget, one of the questions that we actually struggle with is making sure that the administration was balancing the reduction in full-time employees with the needs of delivering the services that were outlined to us as the vision for the school, and that was a major area of debate and discussion within our committee meetings. Without knowing where that money comes from, and we pushed back pretty hard that we thought that might be too big of a cut to make to ensure the services as they explained to us. We thought, without knowing where the money comes from, I don't think we would be in a position to, we would certainly consider it, but we've already reviewed the budget as it is and thinks it does a good job of balancing the mission of the school with the funds that are being requested.
All right, thank you. So at this point, is there any other member of the public who has not yet spoken on this article, this amendment, wish to do so? All right, Ms. McCabe.
I'd just like to say a follow-up. Special ed has been used a lot tonight as the reason cost per pupil is high, and there's other method to do this, and that would be to have a contingency budget for special ed, which is what the Amherst district does, and funds it that way. So they have a fund reserve, and then they ask us to increase that fund reserve. That could have been an alternative that this board could have looked at instead of embedding it in the budget and then using that as the excuse why we continue to have increasing budgets with declining enrollment. So I would still like to propose it if I can bring it up now.
Yes. So the motion was duly made and seconded, rather than read the entire article again, I will paraphrase it to say that the effect of the amendment is to reduce the amount of warrant article number 2 by $500,000. Seeing no one else at the microphone wishing to comment on this, the moderator is going to call for a vote. I'm going to ask you to vote either yay or nay. A yay vote is to reduce the article by $500,000, and a nay vote is to have the article remain as it is written. All those in favor of the amendment to Article 2, please signify by raising your blue card. All those opposed, like sign. The moderator rules that the nays have it. The motion is defeated. Are there other comments, questions on Article 2? Seeing no one at the microphones, I assume that you're satisfied with the article as written, and the moderator will direct that it be added to the ballot as so. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to restrict consideration of Article number 2 by Jeannie Lute. Is there a second? We really should make you come to the microphone and say who you are. Mrs. Julian, would you please come to the microphone? I apologize. I should have made the first do the same.
I second the motion. Robin Julian, 9 Georgetown Drive.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration of the motion or the article, please signify by raising your blue card. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion shall be placed on the ballot as considered, and reconsideration shall be restricted. All right. On to Article number 3. Shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District vote to approve the costs included in the agreement between the Souhegan Cooperative School Board and the professional and support staff of Souhegan Cooperative High School, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at current staffing levels. In fiscal year 2021, $299,102. In fiscal year 21-22, $298,994. In fiscal year 2022-23, $298,133. And in fiscal year 2023-24, $298,656. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $299,102 for the 2020-2021 fiscal year, each sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. A majority vote required. The article is recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School Board by a vote of 7-0. It is recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District Advisory Finance Committee by a vote of 7-0. The estimated tax impact to pass in the article is 15 cents per thousand for Amherst and 15 cents per thousand for Mount Vernon. At this time, I'd like to recognize Board Member Steve Coughlin to present Article Number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Oh, I can't see my screen. Now I can. I'm good. So events have outpaced our slides, as you heard. The Souhegan Board was able to re-vote on this with all our members, and we now support it 7-0. And I understand the AFC also has changed its vote to 7-0. So what you hear, do believe everything you hear and not everything you read. So let me talk very briefly about the elements of this agreement. First of all, most notably, it's a 4-year agreement. This has certainly benefits for us on the board and the administration, and also benefits for the taxpayers, and that it gets this agreement slotted into a rotating schedule with all of the other staff agreements across the 3 districts and the 2 towns, Amherst, Mount Vernon, and Souhegan. So if we stick to this rotation in future agreements, and each one can be different and negotiate differently, but if we stick to it, there will be only one staff agreement coming to the voters every year. This enables us to do a better job of us, the 3 boards, a better job of negotiating with the individual components, staffing components that we are talking to. It gives the administration a better chance to support us as we're doing our negotiations, and it also gives you, the voters, one thing to think about in terms of the dreaded tax impact every year, rather than having perhaps to weigh one district or group's agreement versus another. So we think this is a good thing for all of us. It also is good for our staff. They're very happy to have a 4-year agreement, to know there's some stability in what's coming forward for them in terms of compensation and benefits. So one of the big, excuse me, I should do this. One of the big goals for this agreement was to balance out discrepancies we have between our staff compensation and staff compensation in some other districts. We did an analysis, and it turns out, and I think Adam has said this before in other contexts, our starting teacher pay is great, but the way our salary schedule works, our more highly experienced teachers would fall behind the compensation of equally experienced teachers in other districts. So one of the balancing acts we tried to do was not change starting teacher compensation in this new agreement, but to increase it for the more experienced staff members so that they would be more competitive against other districts. So they would feel better about working here rather than think about going to work someplace else for more money, which if you work out in business, you know that thought goes through employees' heads a lot. We were able to achieve that, so our higher experienced teachers will receive a higher increase than our lower experienced teachers. Rather than the past probably 4 or 5 agreements were brought to you, everyone's received the same dollar amount. So, and if you think about that, if you're on the lower end of the salary scale, that means you're getting a higher percentage. If you're on the higher end of the salary scale, you're getting a lower percentage with the same absolute dollars. Now we've spread that out a bit so that the percentages are a little better for the, or more even across the line between a less experienced and a more experienced teacher. We spent a lot of time last year. We had 2 years between agreements. We're coming off a 2-year agreement. We spent a lot of time last year talking about health care, and our teachers are really wonderful about working with us to investigate health care options that are that show potential to reduce cost. We spent a whole year working on health care, and we actually couldn't find a better, in the sense of lower cost, health care option that did not cause a drastic reduction in benefits to the staff. So we're comfortable that our health care option is the best it can be at the moment, but that means there's no change. So we're sticking with it. And I will say in passing that our staff pays a higher percentage of healthcare costs than any other staff across the SAU. So our teachers are already contributing more towards their health care than other teachers are. A couple of other things that well, no, go back. No, don't touch my buttons. There are some other things that aren't discussed here that because they are much lower dollar cost drivers than the main dollar cost driver is compensation for the professional staff. Support staff will receive an increase as well. We're creating a new position to better support some of these students with special needs who are coming across from the middle school. So we have a new class of para that is being created. We have, in terms of a strategic direction to support the Mastery Learning Initiative and the total strategic initiative that Adam has talked about and put forward, we've added some opportunities in the policy to incentivize certain continuing education and professional development by the staff. It doesn't add a cost at this time, but it gives the board the ability in the future to say, this is a very important thing we need our teachers to do. We will incentivize you to do it to meet our strategic need to provide more flexibility in what we offer to our students or to provide more benefit in what we offer to our students. So, and that, I believe, is the bulk of the agreement, and I think all the cost items. We have one particular position that was very poorly compensated, so we've upped the compensation for the lead facilities technician as well, because that position was essentially had twice the responsibility and almost no additional money to it. So there's a small increase in that. It's, in terms of money for you, the taxpayers, very little. In terms of compensation for that staff member and job satisfaction, I'm sure it's going to go a long way. And with that, I am done.
Thank you, Mr. Coughlin. This time I'd like to recognize Finance Committee Chairman Joel Gordon for his comments. You got a promotion tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. That the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee does recommend the support of the PPC agreement as proposed by the school board and the administration.
Thank you.
By a vote of 7-0. It was unanimous.
Thank you. All right. At this time, are there questions, comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I assume you're satisfied with the article, and the moderator will direct it to be placed on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. I'd like to have a motion at this point to constrict reconsideration of the motion. If someone would come to the microphone.
Mark Vincent, 2 Nathaniel Drive, Amherst. I move to restrict reconsideration.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Howard Brown, Mount Vernon. Motion.
Thank you. So the motion's duly made and seconded. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration, please signify by raising your blue card. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. On to our final warrant article of the night. Article 4. Shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be added to the School Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund previously established in March 2005? A majority vote is required. It's recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School Board by a vote of 7-0. It's recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District Advisory Finance Committee by a vote of 7-0. The estimated tax impact of passing this article is 5 cents per thousand for Amherst and 5 cents per thousand for Mount Vernon. And I have a motion to accept the article, Article 4. Someone would come to the microphone, please.
Joel Gordon, 7 Steeple Lane, Amherst.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Bob Julian, 9 Georgetown. I second the motion.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to recognize Board Member Amy Facey to introduce the article.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for reading the article. I won't repeat it. So, yes, I just wanted to also make the point that the board voted again, so our amended vote is 7-0. Okay, so I'd like to discuss the capital maintenance plan, which is the reason for Article 4. So in order to determine our capital maintenance plan, we had a comprehensive capital needs assessment completed by the firm On-Site Insight that fully examined all of the physical elements of our buildings and detailed all of the capital needs over the next 20 years. This work was done for both the Amherst and Souhegan Cooperative School Districts. This is an example of the inventory of physical elements of our facilities. The capital needs assessment also provided us with an estimated annual expenditures required to meet future capital actions based on useful life expectations and assuming continued effective maintenance and physical management. As you can see from this chart, there are extreme variations in the funding required year over year. Coupled with similar variations in the Amherst School District funding required, this makes for a less than desirable impact on Amherst taxpayers in terms of predictability. While as a district, we need to know the funds required each year, we also need to normalize the tax impact on an annual basis. So using the capital needs assessment, we created a 20 year-by-year plan to determine the funds required to complete the necessary projects and how much we need to set aside each year to accomplish this goal. To demonstrate this, here is a list of the projects planned to be completed at Souhegan over the next 5 years, which total approximately $385,000. Some of the projects planned over the next years include pavement refurbishment, stadium seating, replacement of some air conditioning units, emergency lighting battery replacements, smoke and fire detector replacements, brick repointing on the exterior of the building, and some roof work. And here is the 5-year funding plan required to complete these projects, but with a normalized tax impact on both the Amherst and Souhegan school districts. This is a snapshot of the total 20-year plan and shows that total funds required are approximately $400,000 for the next 5 years. So for this first year, Souhegan is requesting $100,000 be added to the expendable trust fund, and Amherst is requesting $400,000 for their expendable trust fund. Going forward, both districts plan to request a total of approximately $650,000 to be put into their respective expendable trust funds, which provides a more predictable method of funding than what was provided in the capital needs assessment. So what we have done, we have completed a comprehensive capital needs assessment for both the Souhegan and Amherst school districts, established a year-by-year plan for capital needs projects over the next 20 years, and determined the annual funding required to execute these projects while creating a consistent tax impact. Amherst and Souhegan coordinating annual tax impact of approximately $650,000, total increasing with the CPI starting next year. In addition, we established a joint facilities advisory committee for both Amherst and Souhegan to coordinate capital maintenance and facilities efforts. I want to take a moment to highlight this important additional work that is happening as a coordinated effort between the Amherst School District and the Souhegan Cooperative School District, as well as representation from Mount Vernon. The SAU board agreed to establish a joint facilities advisory committee to coordinate capital maintenance and facilities efforts in both districts. This committee, made up of community members, parents, Souhegan High School student, administration, and board members, is charged with conducting an extensive analysis of the state of our educational facilities in the Amherst and Souhegan districts, weighing options for potential repairs, remodel, or replacement, and making recommendations for both short and long-term solutions. This analysis will include the capital needs assessments required to maintain our current facilities, the Souhegan 2.0, which identifies possible renovation projects, and potentially the results of the Amherst facilities study should it pass in this year's budget. This work is ongoing and will be reported out at upcoming board meetings. So what we are proposing is an annual warrant article to fund the expendable trust fund for capital needs projects to complete projects each year in accordance with the capital needs assessment and year-by-year plan. This year's specific request is for $100,000. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Gordon, the Advisory Finance Committee, for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee supported this warrant article in the capital maintenance funding plan unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you. Are there members of the public who have comments, questions? If so, please come to the microphone.
My name is Ann Dodd. I live at 36 Mason Road in Mount Vernon. I'd like to know what the balance of the School Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund previously established in March of 2005 is.
Superintendent Steele.
Thank you. Michelle?
I have that balance at $249,000 and change.
Thank you, and I'd like to compliment the board on this forward-thinking proposal.
Thank you. Anyone else comments or questions on the article?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Reed Panicetti, 11 Mack Hill Road. I want to make a comment as a selectman concerning the advisory acting chair's comment at the very beginning, where he said that when he spoke about this particular article, that some of this money would be used for the maintenance or the repair of the new turf field, and that is not a true statement. If he wants to rebut that, he can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Panicetti. How are you?
Good.
No, when we looked at that capital maintenance plan over the 20-year horizon, one of the projects that was not in that plan was the replacement of the turf field. And we thought, recognizing that sometime in the future, it's like 7-9 years into the future, end of useful life, we should have something to deal with that and be prepared for that when that happens.
Right, I heard it as we could use some of that money, but we have an agreement that no taxpayers' money will be used for that. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board? No.
I guess all I'll say is, you're right, Reed, that when that field was originally proposed, the idea was it was going to, I think I was on the Amherst board at the time, it was originally going to pay for itself through user fees and other types of things. So over time, that obviously hasn't happened to the extent that we've wanted it to. So Pim Gronstra is our athletic committee point person, and he's working with the athletic department to determine a plan to figure out how we're going to pay for it when it needs to be replaced. With those dollars, you're right, there was a commitment that those dollars would not come from the taxpayer.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions on the warrant? Yes.
Hi, Stephanie Grund, 5 Colonel Wilkins Road in Amherst. So the 5-year plan, I know the Joint Facility Committee has done a lot of work, which is greatly appreciated by everybody. I've mentioned this a couple times at different board meetings. I do have concerns about some of the maintenance of the ability of our science teachers, chemistry teachers to do the best for some of our strongest students. And nowhere in the 5-year plan is there anything that says we're going to work on any of those classrooms. And I'm just wondering how far out in the future is that going to finally happen?
Superintendent Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So this is a capital maintenance plan, meaning we're going to maintain the things that we already have. A capital improvement, which would be having appropriate science labs, would be something different and funded in a different way as well. One of the things the school board has tasked me with doing is preparing a list of those types of projects that we should have at the ready. Should there be a surplus at the end of a year that a school board might want to tap into for something like that, or if nothing else, to prepare for the future. So I've said it before, but while there are many needs in our school district, the number one facilities need that we have, for me, is improved science classrooms at the high school level. That's by far and away the number one academic need around facility improvement that we have. And 5 years is too long for me. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I will assume that you are satisfied with the article, and the moderator will ask that that Article 4 be placed on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. At this time, I'd like to ask for a motion to restrict reconsideration of the article. Someone would come to the microphone.
Howard Brown, 2 Blood Road, Mount Vernon. You're motioning for the...
To restrict reconsideration.
Restrict.
So moved. Thank you. This is our second.
Mark Vincent, 2 Nathaniel Drive, Amherst. I second the motion.
Thank you very much. Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by raising your blue card. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion to restrict has been passed. All right. So at this time, we've completed just this. We have one more section to go here tonight. Just so that everyone knows, we've completed the deliberation on the warrant articles, and at this time, the moderator would like to recognize Chairman Manning to do a presentation on the tax impact of the warrant articles.
Okay, since we've already voted, I'll make this quick, but I did want to cover a topic called revenue tax impact in the ballot, which you'll actually see on the ballot. So, as I said, I'll try to keep this brief, but this is a chart of the revenue, FY21. You can see that basically what it does is it breaks out all of the line items for how we're going to determine tax impact from a revenue perspective. notwithstanding the greatest amount, 75% or more, comes from raising taxes. Second biggest amount, 9%, comes from state adequacy grant, and then 7.6% comes from the statewide education property tax, and that goes down from there. You'll see that there's food service, there's unrestricted fund balance, et cetera. So I had made a comment at the very beginning that the unrestricted fund balance last year was $1.2 million plus dollars. This year it's $400,000. So when the unrestricted fund balance drops like that, that additional $800,000 has to migrate somewhere, and it migrates to raised in taxes line item. So that is one of the drivers for figuring out what the overall tax impact will be. Having said that, the good news is that we had Michelle Croto do a tax rate analysis of what has been the tax rate applied to the Souhegan budget broken out by Amherst and Mount Vernon over the last 10 years. And you can see if you look at FY 2012, the Mount Vernon rate came in right around $7.25, and the Souhegan rate was just under $7. Over time, if you run a regression analysis through those two lines, the overall tax impact, or the tax rates rather, have actually decreased between 2012 and FY 2021. This is another way to look at it over the last 10 years. This is just the total appropriation by budget over the last 10 years. And that budget has remained, and this goes back to FY 2012 as well, our budget has remained relatively flat over that time period. I think Adam had made the comment at the very beginning that our budget has increased by only 1.2% since FY 2012. And this chart bears that out. So when you break all of this down and you apply it to the tax rate, there are three areas. They're the operating budget, the PPC agreement, and the facility reserve. When you look at it from the Amherst and Mount Vernon perspective, from Amherst, you're looking at 58 cents per thousand. PPC is 15 cents per thousand. Facility reserve is 5 cents per thousand. So that comes out to 77 cents per thousand for Amherst. For Mount Vernon, it's 0, 15, and 5 cents for a 20-cent impact per thousand. That's how you get the combined 58 cent per thousand tax rate. What's that? Yep. And this is what you'll see on the ballot. The operating budget at 18 plus million, the PPC agreement for 299,102, and the facility reserve for 100,000. And that's it. Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chen, do you have further comments you want to make at this time? No? Okay. So that concludes our deliberations for the night. What I'd like to remind you, though, is that the district voting.
Are you going to ask for comments or anything?
Yes, I would certainly allow this to remain open for comments from you, if you wish.
Okay. Because I knew what the budget system, how it proceeded, and what they were anticipating to do with the budget, I had prepared this statement that I wanted to read.
Okay, so if you just introduce yourself again.
Howard Brown, 2 Blood Road, Mount Vernon.
Thank you. Howard is a member of the Advisory Finance Committee.
Right. This was mostly on myself. The abstention on the first two articles was me, and then I changed my position and thought that I would explain in this. I was more frustrated than against the budget, so this will explain why. And having spent the last 14 years working on school budgets, 12 on the school board and 2 on a budget committee, I will not argue the budget. I completely understand that once the budget is passed or we use the default budget, the administration has total say on how we use this budget. However, I would be remiss if I did not speak up and comment on what you plan to do after the budget passes. While I was on the Souhegan board, we spent the last several years attempting to make this campus a safe place for its students and for its staff. We have overloaded the campus with security cameras, replaced and added to the lighting for darkened areas, and added security emergency boxes to several areas around the campus. It has, in fact, become a safe environment, but no amount of physical security will help if it's not used as intended. To my point, while attending the public meeting here, I observed that 2 out of the 4 emergency boxes were not easily accessible due to ice and snow buildup around the pole. Along with these added security measures, we have always had a 6:45 to 3:15 campus monitor for staff and student parking, visitors arriving, and students who have off-campus privileges. This year, the hours were shortened to 8 to 2:30 and does not include the critical morning traffic hours. This monitor would assist the buses coming into the school and help with drivers who were lost or those who disregarded the traffic patterns. Because student recognizes the monitor's vehicle, having him set strategically around the school entrances has had the same effect that a police vehicle has on road traffic. Since the SRO does not arrive until approximately 7:20 and the Dean of Students does not arrive until close to 8:30, I feel having a monitor around in the morning is needed. We have a problem with some teachers allowing their students to leave school early, and those that drive try to race out of the campus between the buses and the other vehicles, creating a really safety hazard. Having this monitor who knows who is allowed to leave campus early and essentially controlling the traffic pattern. One of the board's initiatives in the last couple of years was to have all staff park in the staff parking lot for better security and campus accountability. Since we have several staff members who refuse to park in the staff parking lot, having a monitor who is familiar with those staff vehicles is essential for accountability. As I mentioned before, I know that the cuts this board makes to achieve this budget will allow the administration the latitude for those cuts where those cuts will happen. It is my wish that those cuts do not diminish the security initiatives that this board and the boards before this one have worked so hard to accomplish. Going forward, we need to maintain and, if possible, improve the level of security on this campus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do, though, is remind you as well that on Tuesday, March 10, from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., there will be voting here for the Souhegan Cooperative School District Amherst residents, and at the Mount Vernon Village School from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. For Mount Vernon residents of the district. Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate all of your time and effort in order to make this a productive session. At this time, I'd like to recognize Assistant Moderator Bob Julian for a motion to close the meeting.
Bob Julian, 9 Georgetown Drive. I move to close the meeting.
And Mrs. Julian, if we could have you offer the second.
I second the motion. Robin Julian, 9 Georgetown Drive.
Thank you for your very diligent service tonight. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.